Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragnix, and this is SodaCity. It describes itself as a fast-paced action game with mixed beat-em-up and shoot-em-up gameplay mechanics. It's heavily based on games from the SNES era, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, and Battletoads and Double Dragon. But before I begin this review, I want to make sure you guys know that this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion in the end, but you guys should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Where to begin? Let's start a little bit with the story. You are Mr. Red, whose brother was killed at the hands of the Syndicate, the crime lords of this soda-influenced world. Now, everyone's a soda can, as you can see here, and every time they die, they have the little popping sound that you get when you open up a can of Coke, or Dr. Pepper in my case. Now, despite the fact that they introduced this sort of story behind it, they never really do anything with it. Sure, before a couple of missions, you will get this little description box about the boss in question and, what he is and who he is at this point. But honestly, it doesn't do anything beyond some text on the screen, and sadly, that doesn't really help in terms of the storytelling of the game. Now, some people may wonder why I'm making comparisons to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, and Battletoads and Double Dragons within this review, and that's because in the email that I received for the key of this game, that reference was put in the store description, in particular that it was heavily influenced by. Now, in terms of story elements, in Battletoads and Double Dragon, and in particular Turtles in Time, they did it with the transition cutscenes, with the end of the boss level and then, moving towards the next section, and the intro into this next section. Again, that's not done here. You're just thrown right into the mix, and unfortunately, it never plays off that. Now, let me talk about the gameplay, because unfortunately, the gameplay is where I think SodaCity falters the most. And there is a lot of things that I have to criticize about the game, despite the fact that it is a small indie studio. I understand the resources in question, but I have to be honest about my opinions here. The fact of the matter is that this is a side-scrolling shooter of very basic elements. You have a couple of weapons you can choose from. They all don't really necessarily feel different in the long run, but you do have the choices. You have ammo counters, you have health, you have armor, and the idea here is simple. Get through the level, go on to the next one. Part of my major problems with SodaCity has to do with the genre it's in particular the side-scrolling shooter genre. Now, there are certain rules within the genre that are there because of the genre in question. The fact of the matter is that it's supposed to be action-packed. You're going to have waves of enemies, of course, but there are certain rules that you want to sort of adhere to because it's good for the genre and the action in question. Sometimes SodaCity forgets about that, and unfortunately, it forgets about it in the wrong ways. For example, you notice this sort of effect, this black effect that's coming up on screen. Now, it's great to have this sort of weird, black sight so that you have to deal with enemies in question. But one of the major problems with the game is the sort of time to kill ratio. The fact of the matter is that you can go down very, very, very quickly from just a few bullets. And the problem here is that sometimes you don't have the time to really truly react to it. The fact is that people will come off screen and start shooting you even though they're not in your line of sight, and you can go down rather quickly. This is very particular in the boss fights, but this can happen even in the regular gameplay. Now, this is somewhat compensated by the number of health pickups, but the fact of the matter is that you can go down very easily if you just make a simple split-second mistake. While it's great to have sort of reflex and action gameplay, I felt like it really hurt the game in the long run. You felt like it was cheap deaths, you felt like it was not really playing to your strengths, and there wasn't really much you could do about it. Now, the game does warn you in some loading screens, watch out for the people off screen. I feel like that's a little bit of a cop-out, in my opinion, only because it really is part of the design. If an enemy is in my line of sight, I should be able to deal with it. But if they're not, it just feels like, what do I have to do at this point? What exactly do you want from me in terms of the gameplay? Stay away from the sides of the screen? I guess that's fine. I guess that's a way of dealing with it, but honestly, it didn't necessarily handle it the best way. One of the bigger problems here is the line of sight mechanic. Now, what I'm talking about is that when you are firing on a horizontal plane. Anything within that one horizontal plane your bullets are flying at will die at this point, and if you're in their horizontal plane of bullets, you'll die as well. Now, there are certain guns that will go a little bit outside that plane, like the shotgun, that have a tiny bit of spread. But the thing is that it's very hard at this perspective to understand where you are on the horizontal plane. A laser sight might have helped on something like this, but the thing is that you'll lead yourself into situations where you don't know where exactly you need to be to fire at, especially again with the bosses. And this leads to a major problem in conjunction with the sort of short time to kill. The short time to kill, if you're not in the right spot, will immediately sort of punish you because, well, you're gonna die at that point. This will lead to frustration for players, and there will be some players that will be able to get around it, but it's the sort of barrier of entry at this point. The fact of the matter is that a lot of players will say enough is enough and walk away at that point because they feel the game is unfair. And there were times in this game, again, I'm going to cite the boss battles, that really felt unfair. And I'm actually going to point you to a boss battle right now. Now, we're going to fight Essay here, who is, of course, a brown soda, because, of course, he is. But here's the thing. When you have a short time to die, it can be very frustrating for the player. With no difficulty settings, they can get a little bit frustrated rather easily. I got him at half health, great. But here's the thing. I take damage right here. I get 5.2 damage out of my possible 8. What's really bad about this is that when you first initially go into this fight, you have a maximum of 5 health, meaning that would have killed me. And unfortunately, there's not much I could have done in terms of a different kind of playstyle there. One of the bigger problems I have with bosses like this is there's a difference between randomly having him fire around and procedurally randomly having him fire around. Now, in terms of what I'm talking about here, it has to do with patterns and pattern recognition. Now, you can have the person fire randomly and have random patterns, but you want some kind of hint in order to sort of clue you in so the person can react in an appropriate amount of time. Here, for example, you see the targets on the ground. That gives you enough time to react to it. But other than that, there's not much hint of where exactly he's going to be firing, moving, or doing whatever. And unfortunately, this leads to frustration because he can do something completely out of the ordinary and then all of a sudden you're dead. It's that kind of hint that will help a player in terms of, oh wait, I have to do this. And a lot of those old sort of beat 'em up games had that. This does not. And unfortunately, it's one of those rules that I'm talking about that really makes a difference here. Now, the game has a basic upgrade system, and I did appreciate it. You can buy guns, you can upgrade guns, and while it's rather basic, it does at least add something to the levels in terms of, oh, you got these pop caps that you can get? Okay, good. You can use them to buy these new guns and to upgrade your guns for a little bit more extra power and things like that. It's very, very basic, but it's something that I'm appreciative of. Now, in terms of the interface, I still find it a little bit weird. Buttons like the B button, if I'm using controller, don't work in terms of exiting out. I actually have to go to that X there, or escape wouldn't work. Those kind of things are very nice to have, and I feel like it sort of shows mobile development as a primary option here, where it's a little bit different, where you don't have controls like you do on the PC. In fact, I think the original game for this was a mobile game. I know this one wasn't, but it sort of shows the design elements behind it. Also, what really actually confused me was the game recommended controller, and the weird thing about it is that I don't think it actually is suited for the controller in the configuration that it has right now. When the game originally teaches you the tutorial, it's all in the keyboard space, and in particular, when using the Steam controller or the Xbox controller, the buttons didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, switching a weapon, it was the select button. Very weird. I couldn't even figure out what the grenade button was, and I basically gave up and used the keyboard controls. For a game that is touting use the controller, the fact is that it didn't show you controller prompts. That's weird to me. That's very strange to me, and I'm not exactly sure why you'd recommend that if that's not in your game. It doesn't play to your strength. And frankly, the keyboard controls work for what it is. It's, again, the game design elements where I think the game fails. Visually, the game isn't that great looking. The fact is that even with the different costumes as you see there, every character looks pretty much the same, and it's hard to tell detail. In particular, the power-ups as you see there, the sort of lines behind it, it's not appealing. Make it sort of a burst outward. Make it a circle with, stars bursting out of it. That just seems like somebody scribbled on it, and unfortunately, it doesn't draw my attention to it, and because it does draw my attention to it in the wrong way. But the fact of the matter is that you want your game to be visually appealing, and I feel like you didn't have the strength there in order to execute, especially in a game where it's simple gameplay. You do want some visual elements to it that really work. Now, I don't expect a lot from music from these smaller indie games, again, because of the fact that you don't have the budgets for it. The music was alright. I believe it was produced by the small team in question that didn't necessarily have the experience for it, but it does feel like it does work, and honestly, for the action in question, it may be basic, it may be not something that you really want to listen to or have a soundtrack of, but honestly, it does work to a certain extent. In the end, SodaCity just doesn't have that oomph factor either. It doesn't have anything that really uniquely has it stand out compared to its brother, and unfortunately, with the sort of gameplay being sort of problematic in itself, it's a game that I can't recommend. The variety goes very quickly. Even though they introduce maybe a different enemy type that comes from the ceiling, it doesn't really change. It's just waves and waves of enemies. Yeah, you get some more ammo. Yeah, they may have better guns, but with the sort of short time to kill anyway, it doesn't really make a difference. It just feels the same as your health goes up as well. Overall, SodaCity is just something that I can't recommend, and I feel like the developer needs to put a little bit more in order for it to really justify a $10 price tag. And that's my review of SodaCity. I will leave my review for Steam in the description below. It always helps if you yes or no the recommendation portion of the review, just so that I can get an understanding of what people liked or disliked about this review. Again, leave comments. I'm always trying to read comments and respond to them at this point so that I can become a better reviewer. Again, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I will see you guys later. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more of it, you may want to hit that subscribe button on the left-hand side. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, take a look at this video on the left-hand side as well. And if you missed my last video, take a look at the right-hand side. Once again, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.